Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bible study. Last week, we talked about Joseph, the son of Jacob, the 11th son of Jacob. And the story started out when Joseph was 17 years old. And he was the favorite son because he was the child of his old age. And actually, he was the firstborn of the second wife, which we will see later in this study, not today, but maybe a couple of weeks out. We will see that that actually being the firstborn of the second wife actually garnered him the birthright or the blessing, because the firstborn really made a major, just a really bad thing, really did a bad thing and lost his birthright. So anyway, I'll get to that in future lessons. But anyway, so we start out with Joseph at 17 years old, the favorite son of his father because he was the son of his old age, and his brothers, his other 10 brothers, hated him. And he would, bring their evil report to his father, and he would, as I said last week, he would narc on them, and then he had these dreams that, basically said that they were going to serve him, and that made them hate him even more. And, basically they couldn't stand him. And so eventually they sold him to some people that the Bible calls Midianites or Ishmaelites. And the interesting thing is that Midian was the son of Abraham by his concubine Keturah, and Ishmael, of course, was the very firstborn son of Abraham by the bondwoman Hagar, even though God actually at one point told Abraham, "Take thy son, thine only son, and offer him for a burnt offering." And so God only acknowledged Isaac as far as being a son of the blessing. Isaac was to receive the blessing. Of course, Ishmael was truly a son of Abraham. So somehow in this family, these people ended up buying Joseph from his brothers because they sold him into slavery. These Ishmaelite, Midianite people bought Joseph and took him down to Egypt. And that's where we pick up the story right now in Genesis 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites or the Midianites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. Did you notice just how many times it said that Pharaoh put all that he had, or not, Potiphar put all that he had in Joseph's hand, and that he was blessed, and that Joseph served him? And the point is really driven hard that he served him and that he was blessed because of it. And that made me think about Ephesians chapter 6, starting at verse 5, where the Apostle Paul tells us. Now, we don't really have slavery anymore in most of the world, but we do have jobs. Most people have jobs. You work for somebody, or you contract to somebody, or whatever. So this applies to us. Where the Apostle Paul says, "Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in singleness of your heart, as unto Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will, doing service as to the Lord and not to men. And then check this out. Knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. Right? So if we do good, if we do our jobs as unto the Lord, as if we were doing it for God, then God will bless us, even though we're doing it for other people. When I go play a gig, if I do my very level best all the time, the Lord will bless it. And I have found that to be so. And if you do your best for those that you work for, the Lord will bless it. And I think that's what we see. And, you know, the thing about this story, like I said last week when I decided to teach this lesson on Joseph, I thought, man, how am I going to go about this? I don't want to just read through the story because anybody can do that. So I need to be able to make a Bible lesson out of it. And there's a lot of lesson here. There's a lot of stuff. As you saw last week, I pulled up a lot of scripture. And again this week, I see that we have people watching. Welcome to Bible study, y'all. Glad to have you. So let's pick back up at verse 7 of Genesis 39. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph as she said, Lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not is with me in the house. Or that word wotteth would basically mean knoweth, or he knows not what is with me in the house. And he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. Now then, can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So two thoughts come to mind. The first thought is that God does honor heathen marriage, because Joseph didn't want to sin against God by lying with Potiphar's wife. But it also made me think about Proverbs chapter 5, where Solomon says, let's see. Where am I? Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to tell you the wrong verse. Psalm 51. Yeah, I'm sorry. It made me think of Psalm 51. I got confused there for a second. It made me think of Psalm 51 because David took Bathsheba, who was the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and laid with her and impregnated her. And then when he found out she was pregnant, he sent for Uriah. Uriah was off in war, and he sent for Uriah and had Uriah brought back, and got him drunk, hoping that he would go sleep with his wife, and then everybody would think that the baby was Uriah's, and David would be none the worse for wear, you know. But as it turned out, Uriah was a very righteous man and would not go and lie with his wife while his brother soldiers were out at war. And so he just spent the night by the palace, and the next night David fed him and got him drunk. And he didn't get him drunk the first night. He just wouldn't lie with his wife. And then David gets him drunk, and he still wouldn't lie with his wife. And so David puts a letter in Uriah's hand to take to Joab, the general, and says, put Uriah the Hittite in the heat of battle and back away from him. And of course they did, and he got killed. And then David thought he was off the hook, but then Nathan the prophet comes along and tells this parable to David and accuses David, basically says, David, I know what you did. You did this thing. And so David writes Psalm 51 in regard to this. And I'll read part of the psalm to you. To the chief musician, a psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet came unto him after he had gone in to Bathsheba. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. And then check this out, and this is the verse that I really wanted to focus on here. Against thee only have I sinned and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest and be clear when thou judgest. David is saying, of course, Lord, you're right to judge me, but have mercy on me. But he says this interesting thing. He says in verse 4, against thee only have I sinned. Now we know that he sinned against Uriah the Hittite. We know that he did Uriah dirty, in so much that he had Uriah killed. But he knew that God was able to judge him. Uriah can't judge him anymore. Uriah can't do anything to him anymore. Uriah is dead. And Potiphar may be able to judge Joseph in this life, but Joseph knew just instinctively that he didn't want to sin against God, because remember he said at the end of verse 9, he said, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He didn't say, how can I sin against your husband? He said, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And again, David said, against thee only have I sinned, talking to God. I'll move on. I could just stay on that for a while, but I'll move on. Genesis 39:10. And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. So day by day, she just kept it on. This wicked woman, she's married, and she's just trying to sleep with this young Hebrew. That's just a wicked thing. She's married, and she doesn't love her husband. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until her Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to those words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. So she lied. She tried to lay with him. He wouldn't have nothing to do with it. Then when she actually had a hold of his garment, when he ran out and just left it in her hand, that she lied about him. And that made me think about the fact that people lie about Christians. It happens all the time. Not so much in America, but it's going to begin to happen more and more as we get closer and closer to tribulation, to great tribulation. And I believe that the Sodomite apocalypse is going to be the beginning of it. I did a teaching here a while back called the Sodomite Apocalypse. Go watch it. And I wish I knew how to make those little things pop up to give you a link to it. I got to learn how to do that on YouTube. Anyway, the Sodomite apocalypse, I believe, is going to begin. It's going to be the first real wave of persecution in the United States and Australia and England and other free countries where Christianity still has a foothold. And they're going to lie and persecute us, just like this woman did with Joseph. It made me think about Jesus saying, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. And that's what's going to happen to us. Joseph was blessed in the house of Potiphar, and this woman wanted something from him that he wasn't willing to give, and so she essentially persecuted him and lied about him, and eventually caused him to be put in prison, as we will see. And also it made me think about Proverbs 5. That's what I was going to try to talk about earlier when I was confused. Proverbs 5, where Solomon says, "My son, attend to my wisdom, and bow thine ear to my understanding, that thou mayest regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as an honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold on hell, lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life. Her ways are movable, that thou canst not know them." So her lips are sweet as honey, but boy, her end is bitter. But she's the kind of woman that you just can't figure out. You ever heard people in frustration just go, "Man, I just don't understand women"? Well, you can understand a good woman. Obviously women are different than men, and there are things about them that we don't think like them at all. But you can basically understand a good woman, basically. And this kind of woman, you just can't ever figure her out. She's always got some drama going on. She's always got some kind of something going on, and you can't ever figure her out. And her steps go down to death, down to hell. And we don't have any indication that Potiphar's wife was ever saved, so we know where she is. Moving on. And finally, 39:19. "And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper." Did you notice again how many times it said the same thing? It was really driving the point hard. God was really driving the point hard. Serve your employer, your master, whoever it is, as if you're serving the Lord, and the Lord will bless whatever comes under your hand. The Lord will bless it. The Bible says in Psalms 37:23, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way." The Lord delights whenever we do things like that. Like, remember the very last verse of Ephesians chapter, well, not the last verse of Ephesians chapter 6, but the last verse I showed you said, "Knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be free or bond." We should serve our employers, or if you happen to be a slave, if you're watching somewhere other than the United States where you might actually be enslaved, but somehow you're able to watch this, serve your master as unto the Lord, and the Lord will bless it. If you work for somebody, serve them as if you're serving the Lord, and the Lord will bless it. If you are contracted to somebody like we musicians are, do your very best. Serve them as if you're serving the Lord. Don't slack on your job. And musicians are sometimes the worst people to go slack on a job if they're not getting applause or something like that. They'll go lethargic. And I always tell the young musicians that I'm with, well, I haven't said it in a while, but I always say, they're not here for us. We're there for them. We should serve the people that we work for, and the crowds as a musician, and the audiences we play for. We should do it as if we're doing it unto the Lord. I know I'm just a lowly musician, and it's not really super important in the big scheme of things in the world, but it's what the Lord gave me to do, and I'm telling you, I'm made for it. I could be out on a bus for weeks at a time. I'm always give it 100%, always. Sometimes I don't always feel great. Sometimes it's not always great. But I always give it my very level best. I do it as if I'm doing it unto the Lord. And I think that's the basic moral of the story, other than, all the other things that I pointed out in the story, that people will lie against us. And there are women out there that will try to seduce you, especially, I guess, if you're a good-looking guy, or if you're a guy that has success and money or fame or something like that. There are those pitfalls out there for the Christian man. Be careful. That is my story. That is my lesson for tonight. So if you're watching by Facebook and or YouTube, then do as the kids say and smash the like button. And of course, if you're watching by YouTube, then hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you can be notified. And let's see if this will launch my YouTube page, because I forgot to hit that earlier. Yep, it launched it. And I now have 158 subscribers. Last week and of course my YouTube page is called Bible Study with R.K. Brown. Last week, it went down from 155 to 154, but it came back up. I actually got 4 subscribers on Thanksgiving Day. So thank you, those of y'all that subscribed. And if you're watching, subscribe to my YouTube channel so that, if you don't see it by Facebook, if you miss the live broadcast, you can be notified. If you hit the subscribe button and the bell, you can be notified whenever I upload a lesson like this. That is Bible study for tonight. It was a short one, but I think it was good. I was actually going to do 2 chapters because this chapter was so short, and I thought, you know what? Let me not do that, because we're going into a whole nother phase of the story of Joseph, because next week he's in prison and he dreams some dreams and ends up having a very high position in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. It's a crazy story, but it's a true story. And it just goes to show what the Lord might be willing to do if you and I are willing to do whatever work we have as if we're doing it unto the Lord. Thank you for watching Bible Study with R.K. Brown. Lord willing, I'll see you next week. Until then, God bless you. Good night.